Welcome everyone to our webinar. Thanks, Patty. Welcome everyone to our webinar today on embracing diversity in your coaching. My name is Stephanie and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. And I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge each of you for taking time out of your busy schedules just to spend the hour with us today. Before we get started, there's just a couple of housekeeping items. You're welcome to put in the chat any comments, questions as the webinar rolls through. Just remember to make sure that in the chat you put to everyone. Otherwise, sometimes people can't see all the comments. We do have a Q&A open. So if you wanted to put your question in the question part of the Q&A, it will stay there until it is answered. And then once it's answered, it'll go away. So sometimes that's a better place to place your question so that it doesn't get lost in the chat. What else do we have here? Sometimes, let's see. So we want to make this webinar super interactive. So to start us off, let's light up the chat and tell us where you're zooming in from today in the world. We'd love to know where everybody's coming from. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Patricia A, our speaker for today's webinar. Take it away, Patricia.
Well, thanks very much, Stephanie. I really appreciate it. And hopefully everybody can hear me. Still getting used to this technology. You know, it's 2 years in and we're still having fun with it. And I can see we're lighting up here from Halifax and from Vancouver and Winnipeg and Clearwater, Florida and Victoria and Nova Scotia and New York. And you can all see them in there. I can't keep up with all of you, but welcome here today. My name is Patty Lee. And I've been a coach now for about 2 years, but more importantly, I've been practicing diversity, equity, inclusion for more than 20 years in corporate America with some global responsibilities as well. And I'm happy to share with you what makes me excited these days is my ability to merge both the diversity, equity, inclusion, the leadership development, and the coaching that I am now pursuing in really digging deeper into what does diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging mean inside the coaching exchange. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Something that I'm excited to explore with all of you and share my thoughts and my ideas. But let me tell you, this is the beginning of a journey for me. It's, I believe, the beginning of the journey for the coaching industry to figure out really how to better embrace diversity into every one of our coaches exchanges. And more importantly, how do we embrace it within our own coach approach? For me, I think it's the backdrop of 2020, the protests, the pandemics, the politics. Today, more than ever, the expectations of coaches continues to change. In fact, I think the expectations of coaches in a coaching exchange are increasing. Whether you are inside a corporation and working within a company or coaching individuals within your own practice, there is more of an expectation on us that we have the interest and the ability to discuss and respect the dimensions of difference within our clients, whether that's a diversity lens or cultural lens or both. So for example, this might be gender identity, ethnicity, race, thinking style, or even perceptions of space and time. Yet an uncomfortable truth about today's coaching profession, I believe, is the lack of diversity. There's lack of diversity among professional coaches, and I think there is a lack of understanding about diversity among coaches and the importance that it plays in our coaching approach. And so it's for this reason that now is the time for our profession and each individual coach to explore ways of enhancing the client's experience by embracing the client's diversity and really bringing it to the forefront of the conversation. This means that we, as coaches, need to reassess our coach approach. It requires us to do some homework, right? And some learning and some work on ourselves to better understand our dimensions of difference, explore our bias, and ultimately embrace the need to change our coach approach. And then we need to aim our focus at our clients who see diversity through their lived experiences. Remember, as coaches, we cannot walk in the footsteps of our clients, but we can respect their footsteps and their footprints. And it's not until we embrace that and we find that importance of their differences that we can help them think about and begin to move forward with a new set of footprints. If we're not talking about their dimensions of difference and how it impacts their lives, are we really coaching the whole person? So these are the concepts that I want to explore with you today, because I believe they're critical to each and every one of you. So whether you're seeking to learn or grow as a coach or to differentiate yourself as a diversity certified coach, or address the needs of your diverse client base, or even focus on client retention, we know through the ICF competencies that diversity is important. The diversity comes into play through the partnership between the coach and the client, and the cultural, the systemic, and the contextual awareness of who that client is. See, diversity isn't embedded in one competency. Diversity is embedded in many of the ICF competencies. It's threaded into everything that we need to do as coaches. So we need to define it, we need to understand it, and we need to apply diversity in every coach exchange. Hopefully today you'll walk away with some new knowledge. You'll definitely walk away with more questions. This is a growth area. As I mentioned earlier, I've been in this in this diversity business for about 20 years, and I learn something new every day. And so this is the continuous journey that we're on. In order to get us going here, I'd like to start us off with a quick video. Hopefully you haven't seen this, and I think actually it's going to be very important and very relative to some of the things that we see in today's world.
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them. The high earners, and those just getting by. Those we trust, and those we try to avoid. There's the new Danes, and those who've always been here. The people from the countryside, and those who've never seen a cow. The religious, and the self-confident. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn? Hvem er bonusforældre?
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are broken-hearted. We who are madly in love. We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. we who have found the meaning of life, and we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark.
So I'm going to stop it right there because it continues to talk a little bit more about Denmark. And to me, the video really demonstrates the breadth of diversity. It's powerful, isn't it? And I was saying, it was produced by the country of Denmark to increase the awareness and the acceptance of diversity within its borders. And when you think about what's going on in Northern Europe right now, get a little emotional. And I see we have a couple of folks here. I saw one from Stuttgart. So the differences that we need to explore, I think, are just compounded when you think about it on a global scale as well. As humans, we find it easier to connect with people who are similar and very difficult to find, very difficult to connect with those that are different. And so I want to explore this concept of difference. So I'd like you to put into the chat, if you would, the emotions that you felt the first time you felt different. Remember that story. You have a story to tell, right? So when was that first time you felt different? For most of the folks I ask this question to, it usually goes back to 4, 5, 6 years old, maybe playing in the school grounds or going off to school for the first time. But think about the first time you felt different. What was the emotions that you were feeling? Type them in there, right? For me, it was when I shared my first kiss. So I was in the first grade and I kissed this guy. His name was Lance Tillman. Oh, he was so cute. I still remember him. And but my mother found out. She was totally appalled. She was so mad at me. You see, Lance was Black and I am white. And it was back in 1968 or so in New Jersey, USA. And there were a lot of race riots going on. It was a very, very difficult time to grow up. And my parents' reaction made me feel embarrassed. Did I do something wrong? I was confused, right? And I'm looking at some of your words that you're putting in here: alone, vulnerable, confused, upset, betrayed, shy, isolated, defiant. I love that one. Shame, different and confused, embarrassed. Exactly, not good enough. These are the words, these negative thoughts and these negative feelings are what we think about as our memories when we feel different. Every time we expressed or we thought of ourselves from the perspective of our diversity, we felt these negative emotions. And we carry these with us, even to today. I mean, we all thought of a story. We all had this story to tell, and we all thought about these emotions that we had. We spend so much time trying to fit in and find things that we have in common with other folks that sometimes we forget what it's like to be unique or different. Sometimes we try to bury that. I think we try to bury that because it feels so terrible. But these are the emotions that we carry with us, our lived experiences that make us who we are. And when you think of this in the perspective of your clients are carrying these experiences, they're carrying these memories, they're carrying these emotions with them as well. Every time they think about their own difference and how they see the world differently. But it's our differences that make us awkward when we don't understand the other person. That's when disagreements arise. And we suggest that perhaps the opposing party is the one at fault because we're generally right. We tend to think of ourselves as right. And so the other person doesn't understand, right? We believe what we think and what we see with our own eyes more than anything else. So, I mean, what do you see in this drawing? What do you see? You're right. What do you see? Put it in the chat. Yeah, Jolene, right up there in the beginning. Okay, a bunny and a duck. Was it a bunny or a duck? Let's see what everybody else is starting to say here. A duck and a rabbit and a duck. It's well known that our brain confidently fills in the gaps in knowledge and understanding by making assumptions. Usually it's the assumptions that are based on what most frequently we encounter in our lived experiences. This is what we know is bias, right? Why is this important in coaching? We fill in information that we do not have based on our own lived experiences. So some see a duck and some see a rabbit. And now that you know there's both a duck and a rabbit, you're trying to fill in the differences, right? You might see it as a duck and you might see it as a rabbit. But if we see it as a duck, we are overconfident in our own beliefs. If we see it as a duck, the rabbit people are wrong. Our bias and our belief systems cloud our ability to see things differently. We work really, really hard to see things in a different way. We have to really work hard. Close your eyes maybe, or lean in or squint to see whether or not you can see both the rabbit and the duck. We easily surround ourselves with like-minded people so that we avoid the awkwardness and the discomfort and the emotions that it feels to be different or wrong. I want to surround myself with people who agree with me because that makes me feel really good. So whether it's a club, whether it's within your department, at your company or at school, or a team that you might be on. But when we are coaching, the diversity within our clients can be exponential. Just think of the video, think of the stories that we shared, or the emotions that we shared of our stories. We don't select our clients bring their lived experiences with them into the conversations that we have. By the way, there is both a duck and a rabbit. It just depends which way you see it and how your body is processing it. Some believe that if you see the duck first, you might be a little bit more artistic or creative. And if you see the rabbit first, you might be a more factual or logical person. The reality of it is, we all see the world a little bit differently. When we're interacting with our clients, we have to take into account the systemic issues that they have lived and how our clients have lived within their context. For me, about 98% of my clients are marginalized individuals. And what I mean by that is they are women, they are minorities, underrepresented, people with disabilities, LGBT, veterans. So it's important for me to know this. And sometimes you can ask, depending on your country, depending on your laws, depending on what your coaching environment might be. Sometimes your client volunteers this information. They provide it to you throughout conversation and inquiry. I try really hard to get this information because the more I know, the better I know my client, the better I can serve my client. I want to share some examples with you. I was recently coaching a client of mine. I'll call her Monique, and I summarized one of her statements, and I said something like, "So what I hear you saying is that you might be considering leaving your job and look for work in another company." She was complaining a lot about her current job, and she looked me in the eye and said, "That's your privilege talking. I can't afford to leave my job. I can't afford to leave my company. I have tenure here. I have paycheck, I have benefits, and I need these things in order to support my 4 kids as a single mom. I can't risk leaving the company." Oh my. Okay, so that was an opportunity for me to check in on my bias and my privilege. I went to a place that made sense to me. I was working with another client. I'll call them Ari. And the focus of the session was the feelings of isolation. What was intriguing to me in this session and in all my previous sessions with Ari, they never used pronouns in talking or sharing information. So finally, I asked right out, I said, "Ari, what pronouns do you use?" And folks probably see, I have my pronouns in my Zoom label here. And so Ari shared with me that they are non-binary. So we began exploring the feelings of being non-binary. And when talking about being gender fluid, Ari started talking more and more on the impacts of their gender identity in making friends and losing friends and being afraid to build relationships and share this information. Conversation went in a totally different direction in the way Ari was defining isolation, and the way he was defining what it meant and what it felt like, and what was in their control and what was not. It's a great opportunity to check in on my clients' dimensions of diversity and the impact that that diversity is having on them. How is their lived experiences shaping their lives? So you can see, I hope you can see that diversity is important in coaching. You can't simply choose what our clients want to discuss, nor can we choose who they are when they show up. We can't just simply put our biases away. We need to be aware of them. We need to understand them, and we need to figure out and bring them to the forefront of what they mean and where they are in the coach approach and in my client interactions. So let's talk a little bit more about exactly what is diversity. It's not just gender or race or age. That's the way most individuals define it. Dimensions of diversity come in many, many forms. And the model here that I put together, which is loosely based on the pioneering research by Loden, Rosner, Gardenschwartz, I represent 3 layers. From the primary biological, which is the green area there, which is simply the way you're born, through the secondary, through the tertiary levels, where you or somebody in your life is making decisions on your life that impact your life, both personally and at work. It's important to note here that nearly every individual, I think I'm good on this, nearly every individual I've interacted with anyway, you're living in multiple dimensions of difference at the same time. Now, some people call that intersectionality. I call it convergence, because these dimensions of difference converge into who you are. We're all so different. And as we know, sometimes we're similar. And we bring these dimensions of diversity with us everywhere we go. We can't show up without bringing these dimensions of diversity with us. They shape our perceptions, and sometimes they create barriers between ourselves and others. They drive our beliefs, and at times we might be unaware of how diversity may be impacting ourselves or may be impacting the individuals that we're interacting with. So as coaches, reflect on yourself first. How do you describe your dimensions of diversity? What areas of diversity most influence your thinking, your values, your beliefs? How might these impact your coaching style? And as you reflect on these dimensions of diversity, consider what role they might play in your client. What is their state of mind? What is their willingness to share? How are their dimensions of diversity shaping their beliefs, their self-value? What might they be hiding or covering up? So that's how I kind of frame up these concepts of dimensions of diversity. And yeah, thank you, Gersh. Impactful, insightful. So many folks that I talk with stay inside this green area. But when we're exploring our lived experiences and how we interact with others, we need to go beyond that primary biological and also explore all of the other areas that might come into play on how we may be different. You might have heard the saying, diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. Great analogy. I think it goes on to say that picking your own music is belonging, and being the DJ is engagement, or something like that. For me, I frame it a little bit differently. I'm a puzzler. I love to do puzzles. And in 2020, that came through again because I spent a lot of time home in lockdown. So I want to use that as an analogy to explore a little bit more the impact of diversity and what it means in inclusion. Diversity represents the pieces. So there I am at my dining room table. I dump the box out, 1,000 pieces onto the dining room table, and I begin to sort them. Red over here, green over there, blue over there, black over there, pieces that I don't really understand over here. And then of course the edges, they go right in front of me because I want to do my edge work first. That is diversity. That is recognizing diversity. That is understanding that all of these puzzle pieces never are two the same. Different colors, different edges, different designs, diversity. But it's not until you begin to build the puzzle, fitting the pieces together, does diversity get to work. And when diversity starts to work and you begin to build a beautiful picture, and all these pieces are snuggling together into one another and supporting each other, do you have inclusion? Inclusion, all of these persons, they're all working together, right? They make sense. They're connected. They're efficient. They're beautiful. And there's the picture that your puzzle gives you at the end. Now, these emotions that I'm starting to feel when I talk about inclusion, they're uplifting. It's beautiful, snuggling. We're working together. Those emotions of the way I'm feeling are so different than the emotions we described earlier, which is, what does it mean to be different? What does it mean to just be diverse and be on your own and feel that difference, right? Diversity and inclusion work together. You need diversity in order to get to inclusion. Now, again, why is this important for coaches? For those of you that are coaching inside companies, you might have coaching programs or leadership development programs, and I ask you this question: does everybody have access to those programs? Are you reaching out to include individuals who are different? Does the decision-making process intentionally ensure that marginalized and underrepresented people are included? Are you seeing people of difference in your coaching within your company? For those of you who have your own coaching practice, does your outreach, does your marketing, does your network on LinkedIn specifically include marginalized and underrepresented people? Do you feel as though they can enter in a coaching engagement and understand what coaching is? Many might not even understand what coaching is and might have a hard time accessing coaching. For those of you who are coaches, and hopefully that's many of you, does your coach approach embrace diversity? Does your coach approach ensure inclusion of 100% of everything that your client is bringing through their lived experiences? Now that we've explored diversity and inclusion, I want to layer on another dimension of difference. And I love this because I know we have a very multicultural, multinational, global audience here. Do you know what IQ, EQ, DQ, and CQ mean? Now, most of you know, I think, what IQ is. IQ is the intelligence quotient. It's about brain smarts, book smarts. Think Einstein. Think that you know a lot of stuff. Many of you know what EQ is. We study it a lot, especially in the coaching profession. Emotional quotient, which is the ability to identify and manage your own emotions as well as the emotions of others. You see it in yourself and you see it in others. You manage your own, but you can connect with what others are feeling or thinking. What I want to talk about, what we are talking about today, is DQ, diversity quotient. Your ability to understand the dimensions of difference in yourself and others. The next layer I want to put on here is CQ, cultural quotient. The ability to relate to and communicate effectively with people from other cultures. Okay, people from other cultures. Now, as I started this slide here, I mentioned global organization, right? multiple nationalities, multiple countries. And that's what we usually think about when we think about cultural differences, interacting from people from other countries. You definitely experience cultural differences. What you might not think about is that in every coaching exchange, you are experiencing cultural differences. Let me give you a couple of examples. Have you ever coached somebody who is older or younger than you? That's a generational cultural difference. Have you ever coached with somebody who works in a different field, accounting, teaching, or marketing? If so, that's a professional cultural difference. Within professions, there are different norms and sometimes even different language. Have you ever coached someone who lives in a different neighborhood, a different state, a different province, a different country? And if that's so, regional differences and definitely cultural differences are at play. I'm going to ask the question again. Why is this important to coaching? Because in coaching, we need to understand your client's culture because it is essential to them. We are taught to coach from a more Western perspective for the most of us, from a Western perspective. So understanding cultural dimensions such as time, space, and communication style is essential because those might be elements that you need to be aware of or bring into your coaching approach when coaching those who are different. We as coaches must meet the clients where they are, not from where we are coming from, but we come from our perspectives. So by default, it's part of the formula. So all of the diversity and all the inclusion and all the cultural differences are present in the coaching exchange. And I've tried to allude to some of the things that we can think about. Let's dive a little bit more now into what can we actually do about it. As coaches, if someone is not open to sharing, they're going to get frustrated. If they don't feel as though you've created a trusting environment, they might not bring forth all of their dimensions. So first thing, create a space, create trust, and enable that individual to share their dimensions of difference. If we push them too hard, or if we advise too much, we're not seeing or we're not coaching through their lenses of diversity, right? When we coach through the lenses of diversity, empower the client and empower ourselves to have these more difficult conversations. We have to ask deeper questions and sometimes harder questions, harder for us to ask, harder for them to answer. When peeling back the layers of diversity quotient and cultural quotient in order to reveal more. Our coach approach must create this environment in which people feel safe and they're willing to reveal who they are and share their whole self. I came up with this, keeps in the back of my mind, be sure. When I go into a coaching session, I remind myself, be sure. Be seen, be heard, be understood, and be respected. That is what the client wants. This means that as a coach, I need to build this safe space, ensuring I have the right intent to ask these deeper questions by being curious with my client. Who are they? Who are they really? How are they showing up? And asking different and more difficult questions and bringing the dimensions of difference into the conversation. This takes courage. And so by doing these things, I get a deeper level of understanding and I'm demonstrating respect to my client. And by the way, this doesn't take place on day one. Hello, my name is. This takes place over time. You need to build trust. This takes many, many conversations. And diversity is about having the time and investing the time in your client to understand their mindset within their larger context. Remember, IFC competencies and what the context of coaching tells us, cultural, systemic, and contextual awareness. It's the partnership that we have not just the content of the conversation. I have a little slide that I have hanging up on by my desk here, and it says content. Coach the who, not the problem. Coach the person, not the issue. I got to make sure that I am seeing, hearing, truly understanding the client. I want to give you an example of this. I'm going to give you an example of this. We are all taught that bringing good questions into every coaching session is essential. And we bring good questions into every coaching session. Yet making the question more about the uniqueness of the person is a great question. So what I mean by that is, here's a good question. I've used it. I continue to use it as a good question. What are your values? What are your beliefs? And you're trying to get below the iceberg. You're trying to get deeper. And again, that's a good question. But if I'm thinking about the SURE model, and I'm trying to frame a question that's going to help my client get deeper and go into their dimensions of difference. If I reframe this question as a question that says, which dimensions of difference, which dimensions of your difference has molded your beliefs? Now, if you know somebody really well, you've been coaching them for a while, you understand them, like I had with Ari, I was able to ask the question, what are your pronouns? Or actually, I just finished a coaching session with a dear, I call him a friend, client of mine. And he was talking about his inability to speak up at meetings and his fear of being wrong and being ridiculed. And I kind of jokingly said to him, I said, does this have anything to do with not being out at work? I mean, are you afraid people might see that deeper level of being gay? Is that one of your fears? And it just took on a whole nother element of a conversation, that we're able to go there, that we're able to relate things of an individual that might be impacting different dimensions of who they are. When you see your client and all of their dimensions of diversity, coaching through the lens of diversity becomes even more powerful. As coaches, we need to have a wider lens. I call it opening up the aperture like a camera for systemic inclusion as a powerful tool. I know some of you probably coach ethnic minorities, marginalized individuals. If you're in a company, I use the word underrepresented because you're actually measuring the demographics of your organization and your employees. But a lack of understanding of diversity among the coaches, there's a risk there that clients may consciously or even unconsciously edit parts of their whole selves that they bring to the coaching relationship. And therefore, they may knowingly or unknowingly be limiting their experience and what they're actually gaining from the coaching opportunity. So again, I give to you the SURE model for you so that you can see, hear, you understand, and respect the beliefs, the culture, and all the facets of life of your clients. The diversity journey requires us to be uncomfortable. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable as a coach. We have to embrace our diversity, and we have to embrace the diversity of others. And we have to recognize the impact that we might have. We have to reframe our questions from good questions to great questions in order to get to that deeper meaning. To embrace diversity, we need to collectively understand and see the world from a wider lens and continue to educate ourselves and learn about the world around us. Before I close, I want to share with you this video that I think helps to summarize perhaps what and how we can think of our role in diversity as coaches. And when this is finished, I'll finish up, close out with a few comments, but I want to go to some questions. So as you're listening to this video, please start the chat, start the questions. Let's have some good conversation.
At a very young age, we learn to make a distinction between you
and me.
Simple, right? But what if somehow
I could see the world from your perspective.
and you could see it from mine? Think for a second. I know all your hopes and dreams.
E tudo que te incomoda.
और आपको भी वो पता चले मेरे बारे में.
You know what it's like to have a daughter who struggles with, is she Black enough? Is she white enough?
You would know what it's like to not have enough confidence to express your ideas.
You'd know what it would be like for people to take your culture and turn it into a theme party.
You would know that every time that you say you have a husband, people pause.
To be gender non-conforming.
To be comfortable being uncomfortable a lot of times.
You know what it's like to lose your little brother to HIV.
You'd know that there is struggle and pain, but also a lot of hope.
And suddenly
we would see
That although our lives are very different,
They are also very much the same. And that bigger than you and me
is us.
Novel.
and as us, we know this.
You don't have to look like us. Worship like us. Live like us.
Or love like us.
To stand with us. Of course, you'll always be you.
And I'll always be me. But there's nothing stopping us.
There's nothing stopping us.
There's nothing stopping us.
There's nothing stopping us from becoming us.
我哋
Needs it to be. Kami. Nosotros.
我们
Nós.
We're stronger as us. We're stronger as allies.
So I love this video, especially in the beginning, as it brings out all of the dimensions of difference and how it feels. And that was the reason I always ask that question of what was the first time you felt different at the beginning of any of my training or any of my webinars or my interactions, because it invokes that negative place. And that's what it feels like to be different. But it's inside us. It is who we are. It's our lived experiences. But only through conversation, through trust, through exploration, through curiosity, can we learn from that? Can we grow from that? And so this concept of us, and if you think of us as coaches, it's the relationship that you have with your client. That's the us, and how you can make a difference and embracing their diversity and bringing it forward. So thank you for your time today. I'm very appreciative for you taking your time and learning more about what is diversity and what can it mean in the coaching exchange and your coach approach. We just scratched the surface. This is 45 minutes, and there's years and years and years worth of work that needs to be done here. I do have a class through Coaching Out of the Box. It's 8 weeks. Goes into a lot more detail. We go into diversity and inclusion in actually deeper detail, but we also talk about equity and equality, bias, microaggressions, privilege, and a lot more. And more importantly, how do we bridge that over to what does it mean in the coaching experience, both as a coach as well as a client, through scenarios, through discussions, and we go into live coaching. And in that way, it gives us an opportunity to be uncomfortable, having these kinds of conversations, and getting deeper into the impact of diversity. All of this is done through the lens of the connection to the ICF competencies and the skills and the language that we need in order to embrace diversity in coaching. So I am going to talk a little bit, or actually I see some, wait a minute, sorry about that. I see some questions coming up. So Stephanie, if you don't mind, I'm going to just kind of jump into those questions. And if you see something that I am missing, please let me know. The first one I saw here is the original work behind primary, secondary, tertiary. Yeah, it came up over time, years and years and years and years worth of research. But the concept behind it, you can actually follow Primary is where you have, I was going to say the most control, but you have actually no control. It's the way you're born, right? So it is genetically encoded in your DNA. This is the way you come into the world. And that is the core of who you are. The next layer is where people are making choices about where you want to live and what is your profession. And so you have some control, limited control, either yourself or somebody else is making decisions around that. And then the final one, you usually don't see in all of the diversity and dimensions because it changes often. It changes as often as you have changes in your career. I like it there because I think it gives context for those individuals who are working inside organizations to understand that even the way individuals are relating inside organizations might have dimensions of diversity in them. In fact, Gurish says here, inclusion in the corporate world is often limited and generally not accessible to those outside of the senior leadership team. So there is an example in the tertiary, or that third level, where diversity is different at the senior levels of the organization as it might be in other layers or other functions or in other tenure within an organization. So I hope that provided, Peter, you a little bit more information. I encourage you to continue reading about it. There's unbelievable amount of research and books and articles and webinars out there specifically on diversity and the dimensions of. So please continue your education there. Going back to this concept, yeah, I mean, organizations need to be doing a lot more. Of course, I'm in that space, but they need to be doing a lot more to get diversity and inclusion. I don't want it out of the corporate office. I want the corporate office or the leadership team to be the owners, the drivers, the advocates, the strategists, the doers of diversity and inclusion, right? And I want it to be really embedded throughout organizations, and that's what companies need to be doing. So I see a couple of messages are popping up here. Tell me the name of the first video. Yeah, Danish TV. Just search it right in YouTube, Danish TV 2, diversity and inclusion. I think it's called The Sum of Us, and it usually pops up. There's a couple of different versions. Of course, this was the subtitled English version, but yeah, really beautiful, heartfelt. I love that. Again, this emotional roller coaster that we go through in that. All that we share. Thank you. Thank you, Jolene. Somebody's at their desk Googling things. I mentioned academic work is based on, yeah, that's a really interesting question. Sometimes it's hard for me to pinpoint exactly what academic work I am talking from. I have read hundreds of books, thousands of articles, and I've been practicing this for almost 20 years. Garden, Schwartz, and Rowe had the original two-tiered dimensions of diversity. That has been expanded by so many other individuals. There are, that's something else you can Google, look for images. There's so many images of what is diversity. I'm going to turn around and look at my bookshelf. If you're looking for something specifically in, I know it's there, specifically in cultural, there it is, Paula Cagulari does a fantastic job talking about cultural differences. But again, perhaps Stephanie, before we shoot these slides out, I could give you a list of articles and reference material that we can include with that.
Sure.
All right, Stephanie, any other questions that have come up that I don't see or that I should be aware of?
There's a couple of questions in the Q&A actually that have come up. One from B, the difference between a coach and a therapist. When we have diverse clients, these borders may be blurry. Example, you were talking about coming out at work, big deal. Question, where as a coach, do you draw the line and suggest additional counseling?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I agree. I mean, as coaches, we are walking that line all the time. Sometimes we dip a little too far into consultant advisory, and sometimes we dip a little too far into therapist, and you have to kind of walk that line. I think a lot of it has to do with your comfort level and your knowledge and your experience in having conversations around the dimensions of diversity. I would never say that we are a specialist or an expert in the dimensions of diversity as your client has lived them. As your client has lived them, right? So a good question is one that brings your client into a new thought process, a new way of thinking, a different framework of how they are feeling or how they're processing what they hope to achieve within the engagement. I believe our responsibility is to prompt, challenge is the word, poke is the word that I like to use, our clients to just think differently, and we bring in these different aspects and challenge their thought processes. So that's the way I would kind of frame that up a little bit. But yeah, know when it's time. I'll give you a really good example actually. This happened to me about a month ago. It was recommended that I coach an individual. We started a coaching session, and they divulged to me very, very quickly that they are seeking medical support in order to transition from a man to a woman. And I just put up my hands. I literally went, okay, I am here, I can support you, but I'm not medical. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. And several of those things you may or may not need, and your family might also need, counseling, for example. How can I help you in getting the support that you need? So that's a good example of when that barrier for me went up very, very quickly. Yeah, Kimberly Crenshaw, intersectionality, she coined the term. She coined the term based upon a legal case that was brought forward here in the States where a woman could sue on the basis of discrimination because she was a woman or because she was Black, but not because she was both, right? Think of the concept, intersectionality. I am both in myself. And we don't know which dimension, which of her dimension, being a woman or being Black, was actually at play in the discrimination lawsuit, but she could only put it on trial one at a time almost, right? Interesting. Rather than content experts, coaching as a process expert. Very good, Doug. Thank you. I do appreciate that. I'll shout out Jennifer Brown is another individual that you should look at. If you're interested in a really good global understanding of diversity and inclusion, where is it? I just finished it. Rohini. Yeah, here it is. Nope, Rohini, cannot remember her last name, I apologize. Here it is, other side of my desk. Rohini Anand, unbelievable global perspective of diversity. I mean, she draws from her experience at Sodexo in just about every country or every region of the world. Very, very powerful. So it's somebody else that you could read. Stephanie, you said that there was another question?
There is, Peter has a question in the Q&A. Thanks so much for this, so useful. Do you find that the U might take longest, e.g. SHRU, though harder to say? Shrew.
Sure. I think it depends on where you are in your process of embracing diversity. If you're just beginning to understand this and think of diversity in the context of coaching, you're probably still in the I don't see it, I don't understand it, I'm sorry, I don't see it, I don't hear it, I'm still looking for it. Once you educate yourself, once you become more aware, once you do your research, once you begin to explore it, practice, become uncomfortable with it, you will get to deeper levels of understanding. What that also requires you to do is to put your bias aside. It means that you need to understand the lenses of which you're seeing diversity from yourself. That all takes a little bit of work, but you eventually get to that place of deeper understanding. I do believe it is linear. You have to go through that in order to get to that final place of respect. If you don't see it, if you don't hear it, if you don't understand it, then you're not going to respect it, right? And you know, hearing is a very important word. I purposely chose that word. In the ICF competencies, they talk about listening actively. I believe hearing goes beyond listening. Like, think about your kids, if you have kids, right? I'm listening, yeah, but are you hearing me? Like, you could be listening, but you're doing 5 things. I want you to hear me and see me. That gives you those deeper levels of understanding and ultimately respect.
There's another question in the chat from Carly. How do you recognize your client's diversity while not approaching them differently based on what you know about their diverse background?
Yeah, this is a really great question. There are some areas of the world and there are some cultures where explicitly asking individuals about their dimensions of diversity might be inappropriate, illegal, taboo, put any of those words on them. So there are other ways that you can ask about that, such as, what other dimensions of your lived experiences? Tell me a story about when this issue or situation was provoked in you. You know, tell me a story. You know, I love the storytelling aspect, right? Give me an example. Tell me more. Can you go deeper? I do believe, however, that, and again, I live and work in the United States, so I have probably a little bit more freedoms in this space. I'm a little bit more provocative. I will kind of ask questions, but it comes from positive intent and it comes from curiosity. Like, help me to understand how you're seeing what you're explaining to me. Give me some examples, give me some perspective. Where have you lived this before in your life, right? So those are just some of the ways that you might be able to, you know, not go head on. How does being a woman impact you, or, you know, how does being gay impact you, or, you know, how does being, you know, 89 years old impact you, right? But more nuanced ways of asking same or similar questions.
There's another question from in the Q&A from Gersh. How does the new normal of hybrid workspaces fit into this D&I framework?
Yeah, okay, this is great. So I was with this class, right? We had our last program yesterday, and we were talking about the impact of Zoom or technology on our ability to read our clients, right? And we're kind of split. You know, one group of people were talking about the fact that they had a better opportunity to pick up on nuances, right? You can see the person's home, get a little bit of a sense of who they are. You can see them so that you could pick up on facial expressions. I'm from New Jersey, so I talk with my hands. You can pick up on all these things because you're seeing them on camera, which somebody replied, but I don't feel their energy or emotion as if I was with them. And somebody else came along and said, I actually turn the camera off sometimes because then I can hear them intently. And it's through hearing their emotion and hearing their voice that I can better understand them. I guess this is a long way of me just saying that whether you're in person or whether you're on the phone or whether you're on camera, you have to use all of your senses to deeply see and hear and understand your client. And you have to ask those questions. You have to probe to get to deeper meaning and deeper understanding while reading all of those nuances of facial expressions and voice tone and energy levels, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I do think it impacts it. I think it impacts it differently for different people. I'm lucky. A lot of my clients, you know, we're good on Zoom. I'm trying to get out and meet them as well, face to face if they're local, because I just want to get to know them. So I'm sorry I keep moving the slides, but I'm trying to get to the chat here. Sometimes introverts or neurodiverse individuals appreciate Zoom, yeah. But yeah, you have to be careful. You don't want to get too comfortable, because if you're too comfortable, then you're not going to be able to push them into the zone of exploration. And there's something else I just wanted to mention. Then I'm going to turn it over to you, Stephanie, to close it out. Remember my slide? IQ, EQ, DQ, CQ. I want to put another bubble called NQ, neuro quotient, right? What's going on in a person's brain I don't have enough knowledge, experience in order to even talk to it. But I think that's another place that coaching needs to go. Think about that. IQ, EQ, DQ, CQ, NQ. What does that the neuropaths and synapses in our brain, how do they impact our differences and the way we need to be coaching individuals? So anyway, with that, I'm going to close out. Thank you very much. Stephanie, back to you.
Thank you, Patty. This is, thank you so much again for providing your wisdom, your expertise, and your insight into such a relevant topic. We really appreciate you being here with us for the entire hour. Just quickly, as we wrap up here, we just want to talk quickly about who's using Coaching Out of the Box. We have a multitude of different types of people from different industries using our programs. If we want to switch to the next slide. Where do you see yourself wanting to take steps towards coaching? If you're eager to obtain your ICF ACC credential, if you're on your way to your ICF credential, you want to have more CCEs, and this is where our Certified Diversity Coach program falls into, or you want to introduce others to coach training. We have many different programs that are available for you to use, and we are super excited about all of the programs that we have available. Jeanette, our program advisor, would love to chat with you further. You can reach her at advisor@coachingoutofthebox.com. If you want to move to the next slide, I think we've got upcoming programs. Our diversity course starts April 5th, Coaching Fundamentals April 6th, the Advanced Coaching Skills Practicum April 20th, and then we have our next fast track program starting May 3rd. And then there's various other courses. And there's Jeanette's information, the slides with the recap, the recording, resources from this webinar will all be sent out in a couple of days once we wrap it all up. If you can move to the next slide, please, Patty. And we just want to ask you, what are you leaving with today? What are you walking away with as a result of today's webinar? If you would like to think about that, and we welcome you to the next webinar that we'll be hosting next month, which will be live coaching demos. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today, for being here with us for the entire hour, and we will see you again next time. Thank you. Bye.